Alright, team, so we're back, of course, to talk about some Final Fantasy VII, and we are here to discuss some Ever Crisis. We're here with a discussion that I wasn't really prepared to have when discussing this game. So we've known for a long time, for more than like 2 years at this point, that Ever Crisis was going to have new stuff, right? We've known the first older stuff for a long time. We knew there's going to be like Sephiroth backstory, like young Sephiroth, things like that. Depending on how successful the game is, they're going to add more new stuff potentially. What I wasn't prepared to have a discussion about is them putting new stuff with the original FF7 story. As far as I'm aware, when it comes to like the marketing for Ever Crisis, they've always talked about it being like a faithful retelling of the FF7 compilation. And when it comes to what we've seen so far of like the Midgar stuff, that seems to be relatively accurate, right? But I did come across like a completely, absolutely brand new scene when it comes to like the Midgar segment of the original FF7. And I just don't know how I feel about it, man. Similar to when we talked about the Ever Crisis stuff with the last video, I don't know for sure if I can show stuff or not because it's a closed beta, and also I'm not a part of the closed beta. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to like show screenshots or clips or anything like that. But what we're going to talk about will be linked in the top of the description below if you want to go check it out. But I just seen a picture on Twitter. It's from what I think is like the Platefall segment of the original FF7 where they're dropping the Sector 7 plates. The thing is, though, we see Cloud, Tifa, and Aerith, and they're talking to Jesse and Biggs, but they're both laying on the ground. Like, I'm assuming at the base of the tower or something like that. And within the screenshot, it's just Biggs talking to Cloud, and he says, "Haha, Cloud, you survived. Good for Tifa." And there are just so many things about this that aren't right. First and foremost, that line of dialogue does not exist anywhere in the original FF7, and I'd imagine probably nowhere at all in the entirety of the compilation. But on top of that, this scene itself is completely new. If you played the original FF7, even if you played the remake, you know that this does not happen. In both those versions of the FF7 story, Wedge is the one that falls off the tower onto the ground, and you talk to him a little bit or whatever the case, but when you climb up the tower, that's when you come across Biggs and then Jesse closer to the top, right? Neither character in any version of the Sector 7 plate collapse is lying on the ground. Like, this is completely brand new. Not only is that kind of an issue by itself, but it's also contradicting both the remake and also the original FF7. And that's kind of where my problem really lies, right? This is technically like a third version of the events of this scene, right? Like, Remake was pretty faithful to the original FF7 in terms of what happens here, but obviously they added new shit because of the whispers, but also just expanding it to be a modern game. But what's being shown in Ever Crisis, at least with that particular screenshot, isn't even trying to retell or reshow what happened with OG FF7 or even what happens in the remake. It's something completely new. In fact, it would technically be a retcon, right? Because it's something that didn't even happen with the original FF7, which is what they're trying to retell for the modern audience. It's just nothing that existed in the original FF7 remake. And it's just, I'm fine with new stuff being added, okay? I'm excited for like the first older stuff, the Sephiroth backstory, and any potential new shit we might get in the future. I'm fine with them updating dialogue if like there's some mistranslations from the original FF7 or just some shitty dialogue that was like cool or fun in the 90s. It doesn't work now. I'm fine with him like touching shit up like that. I'm also, to a certain degree, fine with him like updating dialogue and things with the original FF7 to make it a little more close to Remake, even though they're trying to retell the original game, obviously. They want to keep it in line with Remake, which we're kind of seeing with, like, if you go back to the original Ever Crisis trailer, when you see, like, Jesse and Biggs talking in, like, the Sector 1 bombing mission, like, their dialogue there's a little bit closer to what's said in Remake versus the original FF7. Like, that stuff is fine. But what we're talking about here is something being changed from the original FF7, and that's what I'm not a fan of, right? They're changing that scene. Are we still going to have, like, the tower scene at all? Like, how did Jesse and Biggs get on the ground? Did they fall off the tower? Did somebody drag their bodies down there? Did they walk down there wounded? Like, what is the context of the scene? And I promise with this video, even though I'm like kind of negative with what we're talking about here, I'm not trying to like fearmonger or get people worried about Ever Crisis. I'm still looking forward to it. I'm still excited for it. But it's like, why did this need to be changed? Why was the scene changed at all? Like, why couldn't it just been the same? I just don't understand the necessity for that. For them to have Jesse and Biggs on the ground instead of up on the tower, which I much prefer, because that's what it's been for 26 years now. But also, like, it makes me worried to a certain degree for, like, what else is different? What else is going to be changed? Because we know that FF7 is supposed to be about, like, 10 chapters or so when it comes to Ever Crisis, and we couldn't even get out of the Midgar segment without them at least changing one thing, and who knows what else might be changed. When it comes to the original FF7, there are obviously countless iconic moments and scenes, and I feel like the collapse of Sector 7 is a pretty iconic moment, like something that I think is, like, sacred to a certain degree, like, to see it changed, even if it's not that big of a deal, right? It can be relatively the same. We can have them on the ground. They can say the same shit they say when we're climbing up the tower, but it's just, why change it though, right? Like, if you're somebody that's brand new to FF7, you played the remake, now maybe you're going to hop into Ever Crisis, you're going to be like, what the hell? This is completely different. This didn't happen in Remake. And then maybe if you go back and play the original FF7, you'll see that Ever Crisis is the only outlier because, Remake was relatively faithful to the original FF7. It's just like, I just don't get it. It's just such an unnecessary change. And look, obviously, I'm just talking about a screenshot here. We're not seeing the full context of the scene. Maybe it's out of context, but ultimately it has to be Platefall, right? Because we're seeing Cloud, Tifa, and Aerith together, which that doesn't happen until the Don Corneo stuff and the Train Graveyard and then Sector 7 Platefall, obviously. And we're seeing Jesse and Biggs on the ground, which the only time that makes any sense is also the Platefall segment. So it's got to definitely be that. But also it's the dialogue, right? Like Biggs talking about Cloud being alive and that's good for Tifa. And it's like, is there even enough time to earn that line from Biggs? Because we don't even get that in Remake, right? We spend so much more time in the early game with Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge, and Cloud, Tifa, and Barret, and all other shit than we ever did in the original FF7. And we still don't even get that line of Biggs talking about Cloud and Tifa being a thing, right? So it just doesn't even fucking make sense. And look, I'm a Cloud Tifa stan all day, right? Cloud Tifa, Zack Aerith, because that's what the compilation has given us. And I'm fine for them leaning into the relationships more when it comes to the Remake project. When you're retelling the FF7 story and the original FF7, like we just don't really need that stuff. Like there's already things like that in the original FF7, but there's also a bit of ambiguity, and you can favor, certain characters over other characters if you want to get a different date scene, things like that, right? There are some set in stone things, like Under the High Wind and things like that, right? But all the same, it's just like, I don't know. It just feels so weird. And ultimately, I'm just kind of worried about, like, what other dialogues are going to be changed? What other brand new dialogue is going to be added to Ever Crisis that kind of changes the dynamic of characters, so to speak? But also, what other iconic scenes are going to be, like, altered or changed completely, which is kind of what seems to be happening here. But also, what other brand new scenes are going to be added to the original FF7 itself? Like, the retelling of that story. Like, just a little bit of a worry, man. I don't know. But really, it goes even beyond just FF7. You also have the expanded lore, right? Ever Crisis is retelling of the compilation. And obviously, the prequels and sequels and all that other shit that are attached to FF7, people have differing opinions on. So maybe they don't give a shit if things are altered or changed. But it's like, what aspects of those games or stories may or may not be altered as well? Look, I know the video is kind of lengthy, probably longer than it needs to be for this discussion. As of right now, it's like a wait-and-see thing, right? I'm not writing it off entirely. It does bother me. As an OG purist to a certain degree. I had the same feeling when Remake first got announced, right? When Remake was first revealed and we knew what it was going to be and that they were changing things, I didn't like it at all and I bitched about it, complained about it and stuff, right? And then I came around to the idea. So I'm not writing off everything with Ever Crisis just because there might be some new shit, right? I can accept new stuff, but it's just, as of right now, it sits weird with me. And I actually want to pause right here really quickly just because it's in the background of the video. Like, this type of shit I'm fine with. If they want to add, like, new story or side quest stuff where, like, they're trying to get to know the characters more, you're getting to know Wedge more, Cloud's going on, like, a side quest with Wedge potentially to, like, find cats or whatever the hell's going on here, right? This is obviously brand new, and it probably falls more in line with the Remake because of Wedge and his cats and the cats that are in Sector 7 slums. Like, this type of shit's fine. But when we're talking about, again, earlier, is, like, them changing the pillar segment for the Sector 7 Platefall, and that bothers me when they're changing that type of shit. But of course, that's where we're going to start to wrap the video up. I want to pass off to you guys for sure. I want to get your opinions on this. Whether you're in the beta, you're not in the beta, whether you played the original FF7, maybe you've only played Remake. What are your thoughts on them going back and kind of changing things and aspects to the original FF7 story? Whether that's changing dialogue, adding new dialogue, altering scenes, or just adding brand new scenes entirely. Anyways, that's the video. Subscribe to if you guys are new. Social networks in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, @DavidYT. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Logain, or leave it like Cobain.